Now, a Minnesota writer is breaking the mold and doing something that is kind of blowing our minds a little bit. Very interesting. For his latest project, Ben Percy of Northfield teamed up with Stephen King. Yes, that Stephen King. And if that's not enough, he then partnered with a South Dakota publisher called Bad Hand Books. They're going to publish and distribute his latest novel, The End Times, in a very interesting way. Amy-Hockert had a conversation with him, so take a listen right now.
Joining me now is author, writer Benjamin Percy, local guy too. We love our local angles. And also Doug Morano, who is the founder and CEO of Bad Hand Books, who has a really unique, interesting role in all of this. Thank you guys so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us on.
All right.
Thank you.
Benjamin, let's start with you and talk about this project. Tell us about the book, The End Times. What is it? How long have you been working on it? You know, the fun questions you get as a writer.
The End Times is a short novel told in the form of a newspaper. This newspaper will be delivered to your home physically or digitally, if you'd prefer, over the course of a year. And that will really crank up the suspense, as sometimes you have to wait a month between, dangerous installments. And it charts the progress of this community, North End, home of the End Times, which is based on Northfield, Minnesota, where I live. And a woman named Mary Poole has decided in this post-apocalyptic environment, there are those who are farmers, there are those who are blacksmiths or weavers or, and she hasn't really found her purpose yet. But one day when she's scavenging, and this is about 10 years after the world falls apart, she comes upon a printing press and she decides that this will be her thing. So she launches the End Times, and it starts off small and it starts off as just her voice, but over time it grows. And more and more people in the community become involved, and dangers arise that make people more and more interested in it, because not only does it educate, not only does it entertain, but it draws a community together and ultimately saves some lives.
Huh. Doug, I have to ask you. So when you heard this idea, the distribution piece of this, I'm guessing maybe Benjamin came to you with this. In an age where we spend a weekend binging, 16 episodes of whatever show, what was your reaction to this?
Oh, I loved it. I was with this from the word go. And what makes it even better is my mother-in-law happens to own a small weekly newspaper in Waubay, South Dakota called the Waubay Clipper. And so I've had just a deep appreciation for not only news, but newspapers as a physical object. And so when Ben came to me with this idea, it was like the pieces of my life were interlocking in this really cool way. And so I just thought it was so different and such a refreshing way to get the story out that I couldn't pass on it.
It is so cool. I'd never heard of anything like this. Do you guys know if this has happened before? Were you able to
Well, I've
draw from
always
these?
loved epistolary novels, like Dracula. It's made up entirely of letters and journal entries. And so I'm always trying to challenge myself by breaking forms. And so this feels like some new version of an epistolary novel. And in the end, after, the year of all these papers being delivered, we are going to collect it in some sort of omnibus format so that it will be, in a collected form. But, if you don't constantly raise the hurdles in front of you, and I mean that aesthetically, you'll never grow as a writer. And also, I think that it makes a reader more compelled to visit something that feels both familiar and unfamiliar at once. Like this is a new way into a post-apocalyptic novel, and maybe it makes the audience lean forward that much more as a result.
That's great. And you had an incredible collaboration on this, Benjamin. Can you tell us a little bit about how Stephen King works into this story?
Yeah, so I've known King for several years now. He's blurbed a few of my books. I interviewed him on stage in Minneapolis at a literary festival. And I've never wanted to take advantage of of his availability. We exchange emails now and then, but in this case, I was inspired by the Stand. It's basically the world of the Stand that this is operating in. And King has taken a bunch of big swings throughout his career, such as with The Green Mile, which came out in installments originally. It was a serialized novel, and I was there at Walden Books, every month to pick up my copy of The Green Mile. It came out in a Dickensian way, in that way, a serialized way. And he's also done things like put together epistolary novels of his own with Carrie. And he also had, an ebook come out called Riding the Bullet early on, which nobody had done. And all these things made me want to approach him. And worst case scenario, he says no. So finally I fired off that email to him, letting him know about the project, inviting him on board. And within 5 minutes, he wrote back and said, heck yeah, which was amazing.
What was that moment like for you? I just need to know.
Oh, I mean, he's, for Doug too, Stephen King is a hero of ours. So it means a whole heck of a lot to be collaborating with the King right now.
Just King, but the King. Doug, we love our local connections here. You're from South Dakota. You're part of this deal. You're one of us. But then you decided to take it up a notch farther and said, you know what? We're gonna actually include Ortonville, Minnesota in this equation. Tell me about what's happening in Ortonville and why you decided to include them in the storyline as well.
So yeah, once I realized that I didn't know how to put together a newspaper, that was a problem that I had to solve. And this is where my mother-in-law comes in again, because she, as the owner of the Waubay Clipper, gets her papers printed at the Ortonville Independent. And so once I knew that we were going to be doing this, I quizzed Linda Walters, who's my mother-in-law. How do you get this done? And so she took me through the steps and kind of told me who I should contact. And before long, I was on the phone with the folks at the Ortonville Independent, who all know Linda. And it's very much a small town sort of a production method, because there are so many different parties who know everybody. We're actually using the template that Linda uses for the Waubay Clipper to do the end times. Linda herself is laying it out. And so it's just kind of this wild situation where you have this project with world-class authors like Ben and Stephen King, and it's being printed at the Ortonville Independent. And so they're going to print it up, they're going to mail it off, but it's all done small town style.
I love that so much. And I guess my question is, are they going to be able to handle the demand here?
So that's a really great question, and that was one of the reasons why I originally limited this to 500, because they have an actual newspaper to print, and I didn't want to overwhelm them. Before we expanded things significantly, I gave them a call and I said, demand is high. Could you do some more? And they said, heck yeah. So I'm going to just kind of keep my finger on the pulse of how Ortonville is feeling. And we'll keep bumping things up as long as demand goes, but I certainly would never want to overwhelm them and stop them from getting the real news out, because that's the big thing.
Yeah, it just
we opened up the gates, and the orders have just been pouring in. So that initial print run sold out, but now it's Doug was reporting how his inbox is just buzzing every 3 seconds right now.
Wow,
that's really exciting.
Literally,
so
I get a notification.
Yeah, can people get it right now? Like, how would they get it right now? Either sign up for the news, the actual physical newspaper, or digitally. Like, how can people get it?
Yeah,
so if you go ahead, Ben.
Doug. Yeah.
Okay, sure. If you go to badhandbooks.com, there's a big graphic on the homepage that'll take you right to the physical pre-orders, and there's also digital pre-orders. So whichever you prefer, if you want to get the actual paper in your mailbox or the e-version in your inbox, there are options there that are right there and clickable.
Okay, badhandbooks.com. You're founder
Right.
and CEO of that in South Dakota. We love it. We love all these local connections, but also just the story itself. I cannot wait to read this. And as a writer, Benjamin, you talked about pushing your limits and trying to change things a little bit. You've written across a lot of different areas here. I mean, screenwriting and Marvel Comics is part of your repertoire as well. How does it feel to be able to do something like this with, I mean, can you even just describe, I mean, well, you're a writer. Let's go. Let's describe this, Benjamin. How does this feel to be able to make this kind of a mark?
Well, I have never had writer's block, in part because I'm always juggling many different projects across many different mediums and genres. So anytime I might get, stuck on one of them, I just turn my attention to another. And whether I'm writing Wolverine for Marvel Comics or the End Times for Bad Hand Books, right? It's just always a thrill to be able to conjure worlds for a living and play with my imaginary friends professionally.
Awesome. How long have you been writing? Since like little or?
I wrote all throughout my childhood, but I didn't really know that I could become a writer until I met one in college when I stepped into that first creative writing classroom.
Wow.
And along the way, I had encouragement from teachers and from the woman who would become my wife. She, was reading all of these dopey love poems that I wrote for her and said, you should be a writer. And so I said, okay.
Wow. Amazing. This magic happening in Northfield right under our nose. Thank you so much, you guys, for joining me and talking about this project. It really is special. And of course, so much of it happening here in Minnesota and with these ties to the Midwest, we love it. So best of luck, and would love to chat with you guys again.
Thank you for getting the word out on that.
Sounds great.
Okay, you bet. Okay, take care.
Thanks.